We have quite the new update in regard to XRP, Stellar XLM, and Quant QNT about this topic of the confidential 2025 report. And yes, it does involve the U.S. Faster Payments Council. You heard me right. Why is this important? Why are we sharing it with you guys? Well, whatever the case be, I think it's a big deal moving forward, especially when we talk about regulatory clarity, regulations coming up, and of course, mandates. Consider smashing that like if you haven't done so already. We're going to get into all the key topics and why it matters to you.
If managing your crypto feels like solving a puzzle, it's time to switch to Decent Wallet. It's just a few taps. You can manage, track, and secure your crypto with unmatched ease. And here's the best part. Grab your Decent Wallet at a discounted price by using the referral link below. Don't miss out on making your crypto experience smoother and more secure.
First thing I want to do is give a shout out to your brother in the community, the one and only Smoke Dog. Most of us call him Smoke. He can be followed at SMQKE over on X. What does Smoke have for us? Well, as we pull this up, it's these key things. And in the confidential report that he decided to reshare today, it's a citation that dates back to January, but you're going to see how it all comes together. He says a confidential 2025 report from the United States Faster Payments Council stated that for the United States domestic payment providers to align with the G20's cross-border payment objectives, well, they would need to accelerate or should accelerate the adoption of ISO 20022 and promote, quote, inter-industry collaboration. Think about that collaboration, especially when we talked about the RLN, that was collaboration, the RSN, also collaboration. But this time we're talking about with fintech companies such as Ripple and also Stellar. So check mark, been there, done that. It's the handshake with XRP and XLM. I like seeing this. So much tribalism, it will make your head spin. This is in fact documented below. And if anything, we're going to jump into why this matters for you and everybody else that is tuned in. In the citation, we see here, what could the United States domestic payment providers do to support the G20 2027 and 2030 targets? Some of you guys don't like hearing about some of this stuff, but keep in mind, the point is mass adoption compared to just positive catalysts. So in order to accelerate ISO 222 adoption, we need ISO 222 messaging. As we know, standard facilities, richer, structured, interoperable data. Think about that for seamless cross-border payments. We need to complete ISO 222 migration by aligning with Swiss timelines and ensuring readiness for coexistence with, of course, those legacy systems. And as we jump to the bottom part, what Smoke has, it's the whole concept of improved transparency and to promote industry collaboration. Like it says, partner with fintechs and startups innovating in cross-border payments and boil it, mash it, stick it in a stew. Do they mention by name Ripple and Stellar? The answer is yes. That's profound. That's definitely worth pointing out, and of course to see the high-level overview of the G20 targets. As we pull up more information of why it all matters, we get more into the weeds of it all, and of course, as you see here, as I pull it up from the next particular page, well, remember how we mentioned quant? Well, what about quant? Well, what about ISO TC 307 and, of course, the Faster Payments Council? On a simple search, the United States Faster Payments Council, the FPC, and ISO TC 307, the quant network standard, both do what? Well, they both play a significant role in the development and standardization of faster payments. But they address different aspects, of course, of the issue. For one, the FPC is a US-based industry-led organization that promotes on the whole thing of promoting the adoption of faster payments domestically, while ISO TC 307, which is established in 2016, focuses on creating international standards for blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. Now, I know I'm reading a lot of this verbatim, but I don't want you to miss it. So for one, we understand that there's a mission to enable Americans to pay anyone, anywhere, at any time with near immediate funds. But the focus is this, and this to me pounds it big time. It's the adoption of faster payments within the United States, addressing barriers like usability and security. Now, when we talk about, for example, the activities and collaboration, it leads us down to this, and that is the whole thing of ISO TC 307. that focus on interoperability, security, privacy, standardization of blockchain and DLT technologies on a global scale. And it goes on to mention this, the relationship. While the distinct work of both the FPC and ISO TC307 is intertwined, for example, the FPC's work on QR code based payments and instant payment sending capabilities can benefit from the standardization work of ISO TC307, particularly regarding security and interoperability. The FPC also plays a role in supporting what ISO 222 transition. And say what you want, Quant Network with ISO TC307 is the orchestrator of that, which means when we get to this next part of a global standard for financial messaging, we can see how it all plays a bigger picture into the greater scheme of it all, which now, of course, brings us to this. And shout out to your brother in space, Sebastian. He says, this is QNT Deep Dive. We all, for the most part, know about Secure Asset Transfer Protocol, but keep in mind that is in addition to the following, which is under development. And it does include the one and only Dr. Luke Riley, and it's referred to as the Secure Asset Exchange Protocol, called the SAEP. It's an adaptation of SATP, and it's in fact developed by the Internet Engineering Task Force, designed to facilitate secure and interoperable asset exchanges between DLT systems. Unlike SATP, which focuses on asset transfers, SAEP enables exchange of assets across different networks, ensuring security, confidentiality, and integrity without imposing restrictions on underlying system implementations. Now, there's key aspects of it all, but for me, it's about how this works. And like it says, SAEP builds on SATP's framework, who, if you think about it, was part of that framework. Well, you should know the answer, but this outlines a standardized process for asset transfers. For one, asset identification. Number two, secure communication. And number three, atomic exchange. Me and Jesse have been talking a lot about atomic settlement, so it's interesting to see that. And of course, if anything, when we get further into it, SAEP is still in development, but it does in fact aim to standardize secure asset exchanges, enhancing trust, efficiency in digital asset markets. Say what you want, Larry Fink of BlackRock pointed out the whole thing of tokenized securities, tokenized assets. You have to have something that will create a mechanism to keep it all secure. All right, just a tad bit more of the citations before kicking over these two brothers. Is quant truly part of the whole mix of it all? Well, update May 9th, 2025, because in the abstract, you definitely do see how it all came together about specifically this. And again, in either case, SATP imposes no restrictions on the underlying system implementations. So that sounds good. Building on this work, on this paper, they presented adaptation of SATP back to what Sebastian was talking about. And again, at the forefront. Do you see quant? You do. Kill Eric Marstein, as Jesse and I pointed out in a recent video, and Dr. Luke Riley. Constant references to quant and the whole thing of specifically how it says the acknowledgments. Yes, they acknowledge quant. You guys want to see proof in the pudding? Well, boil it, mash it, stick it in a stew again. This work is partially based, on the master's thesis titled Design and Implementation of a Secure Asset Exchange Protocol, modified from Secure Asset Transfer Protocol, and written in part by the Emerging Digital Technologies Master Program at the University College London under the supervision of who? Yeah, you also see Dr. Luke Riley in that mix. And like it says, we also want to thank our colleagues at who? The Quant Network for their feedback. And I also want to thank Thomas Arjano from MIT for clarifying certain aspects of the latest SATP draft. That is a big deal moving forward. And to see Quant at the forefront, you can see how we tie in so many of these key things, whether it's XRP, XLM, and QNT. All of them play a key role for the future financial infrastructure moving forward. Your thoughts, Jesse and Channing. Take it away.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah, like first of all, for the ISO 20022, I've always said, like, the main reason for the ISO 20022, the pretty much the main reason and only reason, okay, is for XRP and XLM to be able to be globally adopted and go full scale like, because and this has been planned for years, the ISO 20022, because you can have instant settlement, you can have all the crazy benefits from the XRP ledger and all this stuff, but if the messaging is not standardized, the information from one bank going to another, if that's not standardized, you can't really get the full benefits of XRP. And who do we see on the ISO 20022? What blockchain company is sitting on the steering committee? That's Ripple. And so I had done some research on that years ago. So not everything's coming to my head right away there, but the whole purpose for the ISO 20022 is so that XRP can be fully adopted properly. Because like I said, you can't get the full benefits of XRP if you don't have that messaging standard. And to me, that's just ISO 20022 is technically XRP. It's unreal. And then the secure asset exchange the Secure Asset Exchange Protocol, SAEP, I believe that somewhere in there, the Interledger Protocol, ILP, has to be involved in the SAEP. Even if they're not mentioning it, either they're going to just change it to SAEP or they're going to put in the same technology. Somehow, long story short, somehow the Interledger Protocol has got to be part of that SAEP, in my opinion, because the Interledger Protocol has to be part of the SAEP, because the Interledger Protocol is what we are seeing in all of the BIS documents connecting the unified ledger, shared ledger, which I say is Ripple, and then again, on that old document from the Hyperledger Foundation, where it showed the Internet of Value, it showed all the central banks building on the XRP ledger, yada yada. That as well showed the Interledger Protocol. And the Interledger Protocol is for connecting asset exchange networks. It's a very, very, very specialized protocol. And so, and because you need liquidity when you're going from one asset to the other, when you're exchanging one asset to another, you need a bridge currency, you need liquidity. You need a bridge asset when you're exchanging if you don't have sufficient liquidity. And I've always said, like, they're tokenizing everything. So the goal of the Internet of Value is to swap anything to anything instantly. And so to do that, like, every pair is almost illiquid, right? Because you want to change a Hong Kong stock to a Google stock, or a Hong Kong stock to some kind of tokenized bond or tokenized real estate, or like, you need liquidity, right? And that's where XRP and XLM are so crucial.
ISO 222 is extremely important. And if you look at even going to things like FedNow, that is one of the key drivers of FedNow is ISO 222. And going even deeper with the Fed, we also know that Gilbert worked on the Fed's payment and improvement plan with the Federal Reserve. Also knowing that the instant payments that we're just now getting ready to receive with this implementation of this ISO 222 here in America, Europe has had instant payments for almost 10 years now. So we're actually behind the curve as far as instant payment and instant settlement as far as these things are concerned. So that is another major driver of these things, like the liquidity that's going to be needed to ensure that these instant payments and instant settlements can actually take place in real time when you have somebody like the DTCC settling $11 quadrillion in one day. You know, whether that's, you know, the stock coming from here and the bond coming from there, or a tokenized piece of commercial real estate being swapped for whatever the case may be, that instant liquidity is definitely going to be needed. So,
brother, can I add something to what you said? I'm sorry, man.
Yes.
I don't want to cut you off, but you made a good point. The DTCC, the Hyperledger Foundation, okay, where that document was coming from, the Internet of Value, where it laid out how the Internet of Information was created, then how they were going to create the Internet of Value with XRP right in the middle, that the Hyperledger Foundation, which is the biggest consortium in the world of central banks, tech companies, universities, and so on, okay, for open source blockchain projects, which obviously Quant is providing the interoperability for. But the Hyperledger Foundation, they're a senior guy, like their president or whatever, or chairman. He used to be, I don't think he's the same position now, but he came from the DTCC. He was the head of technology for the DTCC, came over to Hyperledger, and he was the head of technology for the Hyperledger Foundation, where that document came from. Wish I had more time, would pull it up, but sorry to cut you off there. I just wanted to add that. You're hitting the nail on the head, and it's no longer 1.6 trillion, because that was like 2003. So now I think 2024, 2020, not 2003, but 2023. Now 2025, I think it's going to be like 2.6 trillion or quadrillion. 26 quadrillion. Yeah.
What I was saying was they just released. I'm actually the video that I just dropped today. They
Nice.
just released that they just hit $11 trillion cleared in one day,
In
one day.
There you go. That's 3.8 quadrillion per year at that rate.
And I was just getting ready to say, in that same document, they also say last year they cleared $3.7 quadrillion.
Imagine.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah. So how are they clearing that? Like how they're scaling up? Like to me, they're using
blockchain.
Exactly.
But blockchain is distributed ledger. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it's probably happening on RippleNet as we speak, because RippleNet's a private network.
And we all know that when most of the big boys come into place, they play on the private networks and sandboxes first before coming over to the public ledgers. Absolutely.
Well, when they come to the public ledger, and if not financial advice, but you're gonna know it. You're gonna know
because it's going to be immense amounts of transaction, no value. Like people don't understand when you and think about it. That's just one entity with 11 trillion a day here in America. That's not talking about India and Russia and China and the UK and the EU and Canada and all of Central and South America and the islands. Like we're talking about massive amounts of money. Africa, oh my God, like it's going to be insane. You know, things like what Hedera with the Nairobi Security Exchange, like, and them announcing that they're now building their DLT rails on Hedera. All of these things converging at the same time over these public networks is going to be insane. And to know that Quant is right there in the middle, facilitating all of them to be able to seamlessly connect to each other so that they can take this African stock and, you know, sell it to maybe the Swiss, you know, stock exchange for whatever the thing is, and use XRP as their liquidity to do so, because those two things don't necessarily speak to each other without that liquidity.
Yeah, well, it's almost like I see two lanes here. I was thinking about that the other day after I watched your videos. I'm thinking, how do I explain that? I see two lanes, right? I see quant as allowing, so if you look at the secure asset transfer protocol, it's to move one asset from one side to the other. So when you see quant connecting all the central banks, commercial banks, everything, and for example, because quant provides what the secure asset transfer protocol provides, but secure asset transfer protocol is just a standardization of what quant does. You know, if I'm explaining that correctly. So, and that's to exchange one asset from one network to another, and it allows that asset to be able to live on any network. Okay, so that's one lane. So that's to go from one asset to the other. That's quant. For an asset to go from one network to another and live on any network. That's quant. But then you've got another lane, which, for example, would be the interledger protocol. So you get a secure asset transfer protocol, which is quant with MIT IETF, but you have another lane here, which is the interledger protocol and the XRP ledger and the XLM ledger, which allows you, which is very similar to the SAEP, secure asset exchange, because with that lane you exchange when you want to go from one asset to the other. When you want to exchange from one asset to the other, you need that liquidity. That's the ILP with the XRP ledger. But when you want to send, you want to connect all of the networks, everything, legacy systems and networks, and you want to move from one asset, from one network to another, just moving it, not swamping it, but just moving it so it can live everywhere. That's quant. I see two lanes here, and I see the quant and the XRP community confusing both lanes. Because everybody's screaming, no, it's quant, no, it's XRP. Huh?
Right. Their purpose, but per their documents, they're purposely confusing both lanes.
Oh, absolutely.
So you don't know truly what's going on.
Absolutely, because Gilbert Verdian said we partner with R3, who are bringing in the shared ledger, while he was referring about the regulated liability network, and that's still on his website today. We're partnered with R3, who are bringing in the shared ledger. And then Tony McLaughlin said that if you connect all the databases to one database, 25,000 database from all the banks, commercial banks, central banks, fintechs, you connect it to a shared ledger, and then that is what the regulated liability network is. And then we see other documents saying that the regulated liability network was first called the regulated internet of value. So you've got Gilbert Verdian saying that all the assets, Gilbert Verdian also said we partnered with R3, who are bringing in the shared ledger where all of the tokenized assets reside. They all reside there. So to me, the unified ledger cannot be different than the shared ledger, because if all of the tokenized assets reside on the shared ledger, what other assets are left for the unified ledger if the unified ledger is different? Right. So to me, they're using different names. For example, they called it the regulated internet of value. For the UK, they call it the regulated liability network. Then for the US, they call it the regulated settlement network. And then they call it the Finternet. Why don't just call it the internet of value? They change the name again. They keep changing the name so that we can connect the dots. Because like I said, these coins were not for the retail. They might act as if it's for us. It's not for us. They needed us at the beginning to create liquidity on the exchanges and get the ball rolling. But if they wouldn't have needed us, we never would have been ever able to put our hands on our XRP if they didn't need us at the beginning to get that ball rolling. So
it's just like Quant says right off the bat, this is not for retail. We are not a crypto. We are a utility token.
Yeah.
And this has been said from the mountaintops from them. So you're 1000% correct. It was never for retail to have the opportunity to custody any of these things.
No, it's not good goal. And if you at Quant, though, the really good thing about Quant is, for my understanding from researching Quant so much, is that the reason that the retails get to hold and stake gateways, and the reason he set it up that way, because a lot of people are asking me on my channel, like, oh, well, what about the tokens? Is it always going to be needed? Can they remove the need for Quant QNT token? Maybe, you don't need to use it anymore. Quant overledger doesn't need it. No, the way Gilbert Verdian built it that way, where you need a QNT to host a wallet, you need QNT in order to create an app, you need QNT to do transfers, pay transfer fees. He specifically created that way to make it hyper decentralized, and to also make it super secure. So he's literally securing the new internet by making it mandatory for everybody to hold QNT. But the QNT token is part of that security. The way he structured it, you're always going to need QNT because it plays a role with how you secure the network and make it hyper decentralized.
Absolutely. It's just like that's the thing that legitimizes and give that smart contract that's been built out, the actual legitimacy and the security of it is the QNT token being attached to that smart contract at the time of that transfer or transaction. Absolutely.
I said this once and I'll say it again. You guys have seen the video I said a while back, and that is, people point out that BTC is supposed to be, technically speaking, a store of value. Well, if you look into QNT, back to what Jesse was just talking about, back to what Channing was just talking about, I feel as though that having utility in motion, a real true utility token, has so much more value than a BTC store of value. Yeah. And if you think about it, the original white paper written by Satoshi Nakamoto is not in line with BTC for being a peer-to-peer cash system. And that is a topic for another day. With that said, thank you guys so much for tuning into this XRP XLM and QNT Confidential 2025 report. For me, I think the answer is simply like this. And that is, when we talk about all these key things, you have to keep in mind that XRP and XLM, the United States definitely stands out. But for that interoperability layer, I think Quant also stands out in that regard, and hence why you probably saw some of that in the thumbnail. So do us a solid if you have listened to the entire outline. And this is the second time I've said that this is the key phrase, and that is, utility in motion is greater than a store of value. And we'll know that you listen to the entire outline. On behalf of myself, Jesse, and the one and only King Channing, thanks for tuning in. Know what you have, know why you hold it. The research trumps FUD 110%. We'll see you on the next one.